So this match we're against Esper Gifts of the Gift of the Gods Pharaoh, and this is not a bad matchup. I don't think we ended up going 1-1 against it. So the reason we kept this hand of all lands and a dragon is because we do have a cycling land. That's why we didn't lead with it. So they get their angel into the graveyard. We cycle our land. We find Doomfall. Let's stop it here. So when we Doomfall, we could have had them exile Champion of Wits. Getting this out of the game is sometimes a priority. We don't want them to be eternalizing it. That's the thing we don't want them to be doing with it. But they got the angel in the graveyard, and I decided to Doomfall their hand because they just got 2 new cards off of the champion, and I suspect that they have some good stuff going on, and our hand doesn't have a good answer to um, the Scarab God, if they have that. And so I wanted to get it out of their hand preemptively. Otherwise, we'd have to do something sort of convoluted, like play a Ballista, have it kill the champion to put that in their graveyard. Then they play the Scarab God, so we can have them sacrifice the Scarab God. And then I thought, well, maybe they don't have a Scarab God. Maybe they just have like, a freebooter and something else, like another creature. And then maybe they have a Gates to the Afterlife, and we just, or maybe multiple Gates of the Afterlife. And so I decided that instead of just trying to exile the champion, we're still at high life total. I'd rather just see what's going on in their hand so we can sculpt our game plan and take their best card. So what we see is 2 lands, a Fatal Push, and a Gate, and a, what did we take? Oh, and a Scarab God, yep. So they did have the Scarab God, so we got rid of that. And the reason that we let them have the gate, there's 2 reasons. One is they don't have anywhere close to 6 creatures in their graveyard, so they're not at risk of getting it going. But then also we have this Abrade in our hand to deal with the gate. So by taking the Scarab God, and they play the gate, and then we have the potential to Abrade the gate whenever it becomes a problem, or whenever is convenient for us, then they're just left with lands and Fatal Push. So let's watch how this game progresses. So I do just go ahead and kill the gate, get that out of the way. So now we know they have that Fatal Push, which is why we don't want to cast this Ballista right away. We'd rather just cycle this land because we have plenty of those, and that's the advantage of playing all these cycling lands. So you can turn them into spells when you're flooded, because we're just really flooded this game, but we're able to cycle 3 of our lands to keep going. Then the land we have in play is potentially a removal spell. So they take our dragon, but we got something for that. We didn't have any mana up. If we knew about that spell in their hand, then we could have Fatal Pushed, just waited a turn and then did that. But now we have to use a Ballista to deal with it. And we want to do it so they can't cast their own dragon against us. We want to be able to attack also. So we did that on our turn. They Fatal Push their own creature so that they can eternalize it, which is not a bad play. We want to not kill their creature because we want to put them on a 3-turn clock, or even a 2-turn clock with this Ballista. And now they just have another Champion of Wit. So they didn't find anything to deal with the dragon. They didn't. We just basically needed them to fade the God Pharaoh's gift. So if they just hard cast gift and get back the Angel of Invention here, then that's going to be really tough for us to stop. We can Glorybringer and like shoot it with the Glorybringer and remove 2 counters from the Ballista to deal with it, or sack the Deadlands and Glorybringer to deal with it. But then they still have a gift, and they're gifting back like Hostage Taker and stuff like that. Like the Hostage Taker, our dragon, we can Fatal Push the token because the creature that they stole left the battlefield. So we'd have like one answer to that, but then we'd have to cycle into something good. We basically really needed. We'd be in rough shape if they had one of their 2 gifts, but they did not find any of that. So they just cast another Champion of Wits. So let's continue. And yeah, they basically didn't find an answer to our dragon, And so we just untap, and we're going to attack them with the dragon and then add a counter to the ballista and kill them with the ballista. So they conceded, seeing that they were dead after not finding anything off the champion. So that was game 1. Then game 2, we have Arguel's Bloodfast, which in theory can be good when the games go longer. So we're just going to go ahead and jam it. Playing a naked ballista just to get fatal pushed does not seem beneficial. They have the champion, sculpt their hand, they get the angel in the graveyard, get an excess gate. Let's stop it there. Let's see what we did. We had the same decision as last time, where we could exile the champion, because remember they fatal pushed it and then eternalized it. If we exile it from the battlefield, then that takes away that possibility. But again, I wanted to see what's in their hand, and we got a hostage taker, leaving them with double gate. So they only have one creature in the graveyard. They have land and 2 gates in hand. So they don't really have a lot going for them. And the reason I left them with these cards, basically, we have a choice. Either we can start playing our creatures like Gonti, Glorybringer, Ballista, whatever, and just like gain the advantage while they're just stuck with 2 gates and a land, no big deal. Or we could draw a bunch of cards off of this Bloodfast and just mount a pretty hefty lead while they are just drawing 1 card off the top of their deck each turn. So that's why we went ahead and took the hostage taker over one of the gates. We don't have an answer to either gate, so the second gate isn't especially meaningful. We just have to keep them off of the graveyard, which we also have this scavenging grounds, which whenever they get to like 5 creatures in their graveyard, we can just start them over and exile all the creatures in their graveyard. So they have to not only fill up their graveyard, but then fill up their graveyard again after we scavenge them. And then we're drawing cards off of our Bloodfest, theoretically, unless we have better stuff to do. So they have double gate, which they are cumulative. You can get both gifts. They're not legendary. But we just want to start drawing cards. We're not finding land drops. So we want to look at what... this time we exiled the creature, because at this point they played both their gates and their lands, so we know about... They played all the cards that we knew about. So we could just have them, say, exile a card, and if they have Scarab God, that could be a thing. But really exiling the champion has another payoff in this scenario that it didn't have in the previous game. It's because we have this Bloodfast, which we're paying 2 life to draw a card. And since we're missing land drops, and we have these 2 dragons that we're looking to win the game with, we really just want to hit that land drop. And if we're taking 2 points a turn from the champion, and we're paying 2 life from the Bloodfast, our life total is actually diminishing pretty fast. And so we don't want to be at risk of just losing to, a couple of like champion, hostage taker, like, stupid little creatures that, instead of drawing cards and playing dragons and stuff, or having to exert dragons, like giving them time. Really, we wanted to just exile that, take away all of their clock, and leave them with basically nothing on board, and we have 7 cards in hand. And then whenever we draw a 5th land, we're going to start dragoning them. So that was the reasoning for it. Instead of trying to take a Scarab God or whatever out of their hand, we just wanted to exile the champion. So they do have another champion, and they put 1 creature in the graveyard, but we did draw our land finally. And so here we have a decision, do we exert or not? And I chose not to, because we want to clock them instead. If you look here, if we exert and kill the champion, then they get to trigger both of these. So they're like, gain a life, draw a card, discard a card. Gain a life, draw a card, discard a card. So that's filling up the graveyard to activate the gates, and it's decreasing our clock considerably, not only because they're gaining the 2 life from their creature dying, but also because our creature then would be exerted and would not be able to attack the following turn. So I felt like that would just be playing into their game plan. As far ahead as it looks like we are, I didn't feel like I was actually that far ahead. if we start exerting their creature and they start milling themselves and regaining the life and filling up their graveyard, then like once they fill up their graveyard, we have to use the scavenging grounds. And then if they can fill up their graveyard again, like we really have to just kill them at some point before that can happen. As it turns out, they either drew the Scarab God or they had the Scarab God. So if we did just have them exile a card from their hand, it's possible we could have just preemptively taken the Scarab God. So anyway, now we're kind of in a situation where they have Angel and a few other creatures in the graveyard, and we should have Dragon. We do, however, have a plan. If you watch how this comes together. So see what we do here. We exert, targeting the Scarab God. So remember, Scarab God says, when this creature dies, return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. So we deal 4 damage, and then we play a Ballista for 1, and we shoot the Scarab God, which does trigger the gates, but that's kind of a thing that is unfortunate. They have no cards in hand, though. So when they trigger the gates, they're just milling themselves for 2 cards. So that's not really that big of a deal. So they mill themselves, and then we activate Scavenging Grounds. So the Scavenging Grounds empties their graveyard, so they have to start all over. They have no cards in hand, and the Scarab God that went to the graveyard because it died from the Ballista Ping and the Glorybringer Exert is now exiled instead of going back to their hand. So that was the cute little trick that we had to be able to deal with this Scarab God. Now the opponent has no cards in graveyard, no cards in hand, and just a champion and 2 gates. We are, however, at 10 life. So that's kind of a thing. An interesting thing that I thought was going to come up this game was the Argyle's Bloodfast transforming. So if we went to 5 life, it could transform, and then we can start using Diamond Valley to sacrifice our own creatures to stay alive. I don't think that actually comes up, but let's continue watching. So they drew Minister, which is one way to potentially fill up the graveyard for the gates. We played our land tap because we're on the plan of finishing them off with ballistas. We attack without exert. They play freebooter. There's only 1 target. They attack us down to 6. Now we untap. We play ballista. And now here, interesting. A lot of people there are like, well, why didn't you attack? What was the deal with what was up with that? Well, here's the thing. If we attack that turn, let's say we have 2 lines. They have no cards in hand, so like nothing's, we're not trying to play around anything other than the top of their deck. But here, if we, let's say, ping the freebooter twice, so that we can attack with both the Glorybringers, then the opponent would gain 2 life off the gates, so they'd go to 12 life, and they'd mill 2 cards into their graveyard, and then we'd attack them for 8, so they'd go to 4, and then we could ping them with Ballista, but that only puts them to 3. The other line we could take, we could exert one of the Glorybringers, target the freebooter, and so they would go to 12 life. They would take 8 from the Glorybringers, but then we can only get them to 1 off of the Ballista. So we cannot actually kill them this turn because of the life gained from the gates. And so what we're doing, if we attack this turn, if we put the freebooter into the graveyard, so that's 1 creature in the graveyard plus the Squire. That's what happened there? No, I think they milled themselves. Yeah, so they have no cards in the graveyard. So if we kill the freebooter, that's 1 creature in the graveyard. They, let's say, worst case scenario, they trigger both gates, put 2 more creatures in the graveyard. So that's 3 creatures in the graveyard. Then they activate Minister of Inquiries and get maybe another creature or 2 into the graveyard. And then they untap and they activate Minister of Inquiries again on themselves, put more creatures in their graveyard, and they have 6. Then they activate both gates to get 2 copies of the Godfarer's Gift. And if some of those creatures in the graveyard, if at least one of them was an angel or another flying creature, then, well, we're just literally dead. So we could have just completely thrown away this game if we try to just attack with our dragons and kill the freebooter and, ballista them out. So that was a turn where a lot of people, like, okay, your opponent's at 10 life and you have a pair of glory bringers and they just have a freebooter. Like, of course you attack. But no, that's one of the ways that we could throw this game away, is by attacking on this turn. So instead, what we did was we passed the turn so that now they have to just hit 6 creatures in the graveyard off of 2 Minister of Inquiries activations, which is extremely unlikely, but they have to do that, or fill up the graveyard some other way by drawing something important in their draw step. Because then on the following turn, we can play the Ballista for 4 in our hand, and then we can kill the freebooter with the Glorybringer activation, exert, and attack for will more than lethal. And so basically they have one turn, exactly one turn, to fill up their graveyard for the gates. And instead of helping them do that by killing the freebooter, we don't help them at all, and we just set up the for sure win on our turn and make them have to do it, get really lucky on the minister instead of just getting like reasonably lucky. So that was a really important key turn that I think a lot of people, if you don't think through the turn adequately, you're going to mess that up and potentially throw away this game that you should definitely be winning. So I did not do that. I waited for the following turn. They tried to do that. We say, okay, we're going to go ahead and kill the freebooter. So now they have 2 creatures in the graveyard. It's impossible for them to hit the third. Or not impossible, but like, hold on. So at that point, when he kills our ballista, I felt like we had to kill the freebooter. It's possible that we should have just dealt the damage to the opponent, because they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so if they'd hit, they would have gotten one of the gates active. And if it were like an angel or something, could have been in trouble. It's possible, yeah, we're just supposed to ping the opponent there and then untap and use the Glorybringer exert to kill the creature. Yeah, so I think I actually screwed up. I didn't do the big punt the previous turn, but that turn I think I should not have killed the freebooter. Should just dealt damage to the opponent. But anyway, now we attack and they take it, and then we just kill them with the ballista. I'm trying to think if I needed to do that. So if I just ping the opponent, no, it's the same thing. So yeah, I screwed that up. There was no reason for me to kill the freebooter at that point with the ballista. I should have just targeted the opponent because we had the second ballista in hand already. And then the exert from the Glorybringer is the way we should have killed the freebooter. So it ended up not costing us. But yeah, the previous turn is the more instructive one, where I did not make the mistake, where I made the important play to not throw away the game. So that was that match. Let's return for the next round.